Welcome to the King of Iron Fist Tournament 7. Katarina Alves.
Yeah.
New challenger.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
New challenger. Get ready for the next battle. Round 1. Fight.
Yeah.
KO. Round 2. Fight.
Yeah.
KO. Round 3. Fight. KO. Round 4. Fight.
Yeah.
KO.
Come on! 필살기 같은 건 없어?
New challenger. Get ready for the next battle.
Vamos lá. Eu vou chutar sua bunda até o inferno.
Round 1. Fight.
Yeah!
KO. Round 2. Fight.
Yeah!
KO. Round 3. Fight. KO.
Corre de volta pra
win.
sua mamãe.
New challenger. Get ready for the next battle.
Vamos lá. Eu vou chutar sua bunda até o inferno.
Round 1. Fight.
Yeah!
KO. Round 2. Fight. KO. Round 3. Fight. KO. You lose. New challenger. Get ready for the next battle.
Vamos lá. Eu vou chutar sua bunda até o inferno.
Round 1. Fight. Perfect. Round 2. Fight. KO. Round 3. Fight.
Yeah!
KO. You lose.
Stream's over. Whoops. See ya.
Get ready for the next battle.
Vamos lá. Eu vou chutar sua bunda.
Round 1. Fight. 2. Fight.
Yeah. Yeah.
KO. Round 3. Fight.
Yeah. Yeah.
KO. Round 4. Fight. KO. Final round. Fight. KO. You lose.
Thank you, spirits.
Get ready for the next battle.
Vamos.
Round 1. Fight. Perfect. Round 2. Fight. KO. Round 3. Fight. KO. Round 4. Fight. KO. You lose.
Thank you, spirits.
Get ready for the next battle.
Vamos lá. Eu vou chutar sua bunda até o inferno.
Round 1. Fight.
Yeah. Vem aqui. Yeah. Yeah. Morra. Yeah.
KO. Round 2. Fight. Great. Round 3. Fight. KO. You lose.
Stream's over. Whoops. See ya.
Get ready for the next battle.
Vamos.
Round 1. Fight.
Yeah. Ha. Yeah.
KO. Round 2. Fight.
Yeah.
KO. Round 3. Fight. KO. Round 4. Fight. KO. You lose.
Stream's over. Whoops. See ya.
It's pretty hard to defeat characters that you don't know how to play.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
challenger. Get ready for the next battle.
Katarina is not easy to use. I keep getting broken strings. And I really hate Yoshimitsu. I don't know how to use Yoshimitsu as well. That's why I'm gonna be expecting more defeats.
Round one. Fight.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah, I think I remember this.
Yeah.
What are you up to, dude?
Yeah.
Time up. Round two. Fight.
Ha. Ha. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Round three. Fight.
Yeah. 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 More. Yeah. Yeah.
Perfect. You win.
Você está me dando sono.
New challenger. Get ready for the next battle.
Oh man, this is gonna be hard.
Vamos lá. Eu vou chutar sua bunda até o inferno.
Round one. Fight.
Yeah.
Perfect. Round two. Fight. KO. Round 3.
Finding it difficult to do.
Fight.
How did they do that?
KO. Round 4. Fight. Great. Final round. Fight. Perfect. You lose.
And well.
New challenger. Get ready for the next battle.
I didn't know what just happened. I think I saw some move that I didn't know how to do it. And I'm so lazy to check the internet and how to use Katarina. The moveset that I've been using since that is all that I just discovered while playing. haven't really practiced Katarina that much. Just go ahead and play online and see whatever moves that we discovered while playing against online.
Vamos lá.
Round 1. Fight.
Yeah.
I don't know how to welcome it. That's why it sucks.
Yeah.
KO.
Really
Round
don't know how
2.
to welcome.
Fight. 3. Fight.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
KO. Round 4. Fight.
Yeah. Yeah.
KO.
Vai de volta pra
win.
sua mamãe.
That's Shane. I like that place. I like that stage. So what are the other combos?
New challenger.
Alright.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Oh, okay.
New challenger. Get ready for the next battle. Round
Yeah, I
1.
like this stage.
Fight.
So I don't...
Yeah.
Why is it
KO.
4 bars?
Round 2.
I don't know.
Fight.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
KO. Round 3. Fight.
Yeah.
벌써
You
끝이야? 더
lose.
덤벼봐.
Let's try it again.
Get ready for the next battle.
As they say, the more you play.
Round 1. Fight.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
KO. Round 2. Fight.
Yeah.
What the?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Great. Round 3. Fight.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. More. Yeah. Yeah.
KO.
It's so
Round
laggy.
4. Fight.
Yeah. Vem aqui. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, this is the final. Play it safe.
Yeah. Yeah.
KO.
Oh, we're gonna play safe.
필살기 같은 건 없어?
Come on, let's do it again. I still don't know why it's so laggy for 5 bars. Let's see what else can we discover?
Yeah.
Should be another way.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is
New challenger.
I haven't really used that moves ever since. It's so
Yeah. Yeah. More.
so obvious because the way she is.
Yeah. 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 More.
Oh,
Yeah.
what the heck? So
New challenger. Get ready for the next battle.
this isn't Julia again. Oh man. I think this is a different guy.
Vamos.
Round 1.
Oh yeah, I think we have to.
Yeah.
行きますやっ そこ
Why are you stopping?
や
Yeah.
KO. Round 2. Fight.
What the heck?
Yeah. Ha. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
KO. Round 3. Fight.
Yeah.
Welcome to man.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
KO. Round 4. Fight.
Yeah. Yeah.
そこ
Yeah.
That's not fair.
Yeah.
KO. Final round. Fight.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Perfect. You win.
Você tem técnica, mas não tem alma.
I only know one wins at the moment. One set of stream.
Get ready for the
And
next
a
battle.
short version. And the longer version. And I don't know how to wall combo with N players. Haven't really practiced wall combos.
Vamos lá. Eu vou
Vamos
chutar
lá.
sua bunda.
Round 1. Fight.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What the heck? Oh,
KO. Round 2.
no wall
Fight.
combos.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Ha. Yeah.
KO. Round
I
3.
only got 2 sets
Fight.
of what?
行きますやそこ
KO. Round 4. Fight.
Yeah. 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 More.
Pretty hard.
そこや
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the only
You win.
moves
Você
that I
tem
know.
técnica, mas não tem alma.
Why not we? Check for another moveset. So let's go YouTube Katarina.
New challenger.
Oh, it's new.
Ha!
Okay.
Yeah! Yeah! Ha! Yeah!
Give me something new. Okay. I already know that.
New challenger. Get ready for the next battle.
Ah, it's Eddie again. Why is he just standing there? What the heck?
Round one. Fight.
Yeah!
KO. Round two.
I think I haven't.
Fight. KO. Round three. Fight.
Yeah!
That's not fair.
KO. Round four. Fight.
Yeah! Yeah!
KO. Final round. Fight.
Yeah! 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 Yeah!
KO.
Can't believe I still won that
You
fight.
win.
Você tem técnica, mas não tem alma.
It's hard.
ready for the next battle.
Okay.
Round 1. Fight.
Ha! Yeah! Yeah, yeah! More!
Okay,
Yeah!
KO. Round 2. Fight.
Yeah! 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 More! Ha! More!
KO.
That was so.
Round 3. Fight.
Let's fix them.
Yeah! Yeah! More! Ha! Yeah! Yeah!
KO. Round 4. Fight.
Yeah! 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 Yeah!
KO. Final round. Fight.
Yeah! 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 Vem aqui. Yeah! Yeah! Morra!
Great. You win.
That was a lucky shot.
Você está me dando sono.
Finally got my revenge. Oh, okay.
Yeah!
New challenger.
How did down forward 2-4?
Yeah! Yeah!
Nope.
Yeah! Yeah! Yeah!
New challenger. Get ready for the next battle.
So forward, 3. Down 3. Down forward 1. Down, forward. 2 and 4. Really? 2, 4. Down, forward 1. Down, forward 2, 4. Okay. Down, forward 1. Okay. Let's try that.
Vamos lá.
Round
Oh.
1.
Here we go.
Fight.
Yeah.
That wasn't
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Get that damage. So annoying.
Yeah.
KO.
Down forward.
Round 2. Fight.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Ah, no.
Yeah.
KO.
That was the
Round 3. Fight.
Yeah. Morra. Ha. Yeah. Yeah. Morra.
KO. Round 4. Fight.
Morra. Yeah. Yeah. Morra. Morra. Yeah.
Perfect. Final round. Fight.
Yeah. Yeah. Morra.
KO.
Now we're getting a new one.
You win.
Você tem técnica, mas não tem alma.
Hurry. 2, down, down 2, down forward 1, down 3. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Down forward 4. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Down dash. Down forward 1. Down the down
New challenger.
down down down.
Get ready for the next battle.
Hurry. Okay. Nina. I didn't know that it's already 4 p.m.
Round 1. Fight.
Yeah.
Force control.
Fight.
Yeah. Yeah.
KO. Round 3. Fight.
Yeah.
KO. Round 4. Fight. KO. Final round. Fight. KO.
Goodbye,
You
my
lose.
well done.
Down 4.
Get ready for the next battle.
Down 1. Down 2. Forward 4. All right.
Round 1. Fight.
Down forward 1. Ah.
KO. Round 2. Fight.
Yeah.
Why the heck?
KO.
Funny.
Round 3.
Doing repeating
Fight.
same thing. Oh, broken strings. Didn't know that. She knows. No.
Yeah.
Up.
KO. Round 4.
Only I thought.
Fight.
Oh, what the heck? Some kind of poking.
KO. You lose.
I
My
need to
pleasure.
find another launcher. This Up.
Get ready for the next battle.
Up for 3 and 4. It's not really that effective. And so far, I only know one
Vamos lá.
set
Eu vou
of
chutar sua bunda até o inferno.
Round 1.
Katarina.
Fight.
Yeah.
Oh, gaming. No.
KO. Round 2. Fight.
Nope. Oh, what the heck?
KO. Round 3. Fight.
Oh, what?
KO. Round 4. Fight.
What now? Okay.
Perfect. Final round.
Doing it.
Fight.
What the? Oh. Oh man. Oh, what the heck?
KO.
I don't know how to walk on this girl.
You win.
Você está me dando sono.
You better do some more combo, woman.
Get ready for the next battle. Round 1. Fight.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, alright.
Round 2. Fight.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Oh, what the heck?
Round 3. Fight.
There it is. How did it?
KO. Round 4. Fight.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Slow as combo.
KO.
It's the slowest
You
combo.
lose.
Such a rush.
Get ready for the next battle.
Hey, drink your water.
Round 1. Fight.
Nope. Nope.
Yeah.
KO. Round 2. Fight.
Oh, what the heck?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
KO.
Cats. What does down
Round
forward
3.
one? I don't know why.
Fight.
Nope. That's one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
KO. You lose.
My pleasure.
we need to find some other launcher. Man, the three launchers
ready
that
for
I
the
know
next
of
battle.
doesn't really work that much. Man, it's so slow. Unlike other players' launcher, like Brian, they're so fast. I mean, I don't know
Vamos lá.
what are the other
Round
launchers
1.
that they already have.
Fight.
What was that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I know.
KO. Round 2.
Another
Fight.
launcher. Should be. Nope.
Yeah.
Fight.
Yeah.
Counter hit. Ooh, he shields. Oh, God. Wow.
KO. You lose.
My pleasure.
Controllers to the shit.
Get ready for the
Yeah.
next battle.
I bought this online and then I bought it off from eBay and it wasn't working. The motherboard was fried, and I had to buy that cheap ass USB motherboard from Amazon, which cost like $6.
Vamos lá.
£6.
Eu vou chutar sua bunda.
And
Round one.
I want it there.
Fight.
No. No.
KO. Round two. Fight.
What's that? Okay. That was a new one. But I think it was only because that was a counter. Nice try.
KO. Round three.
But nice try.
Fight.
I don't know how
KO. Round four. Fight.
I kind of like it.
You lose.
My pleasure.
Oh, that's
Get ready for the next battle.
Let's just leave.
Vamos lá.
Round one.
Going to be promotion again.
Fight.
What the heck? I didn't do that. Why am I going on her here?
Great. Round two. Fight. Perfect. Round 3. Fight.
There was a woman snapping a woman.
KO.
I knew it. She wasn't expecting
Round
that.
4. Fight.
Oh, crap.
KO. You lose.
My pleasure.
Missed that. Oh yeah.
Ready for the next battle.
I mean, Eddie Gordo. Yeah, better. I'm just trying to learn how to play Katarina. Fireplace. How are you, man?
Come over here.
Round 1.
So right now I'm on
Fight.
demotion. Let's see what's the poking game here.
KO. Round 2.
Katarina's poking is so
Fight.
hard. That's all she can do. No other poke.
KO.
Bad move.
Round 3. Fight.
Oh.
KO. You lose.
My pleasure.
I bought it when it was launched in the PS4, but I haven't really gotten into playing with the online because my internet sucks when it was released. So I only been able to play this online when we moved here in the house now because I've got a better internet, and right now I just started playing online matches like a couple months.
New challenger.
Like it's only been this year since I played online matches.
Get
Tekken
ready
7.
for the next battle.
But I've been playing Tekken ever since Tekken 3, but I'm not really that good. So yeah, I'm just a casual player. And I really don't have time. I mean, I'm not really devoted to learning all the moves. I only play and then see if whatever moves that I discover during the time that I'm playing it. So right now, all the moves from Katarina is like discovered when I started
Eu vou
playing her,
chutar sua bunda até o inferno.
and I only
Round
started
one.
playing her this week. So
Fight.
it's pretty hard. She's not an easy character. All this.
Perfect.
I really hate these players.
Round 2.
So dark.
Fight. Perfect.
Mostly I play PUBG.
Round 3.
And then
Fight.
oh, that's nice. How about you? You play PUBG? Oh. The games. Yeah, I play PUBG a lot. Oh man.
KO. Round 4. Fight.
Tweeters are all over, but you know, as long as you're enjoying the game, yeah, it's fine.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Just that I got a shitty joystick.
KO.
That caught her.
Final round. Fight.
Yeah, I just finished God of War from PS4. Well, I'm planning of playing the Witcher 3 before the Netflix. The oh, nope. Oh no, that was so wrong.
KO. You lose.
Such a rush.
Oh, Saints Row 4. Huh. Was that in the PS4 or the console? Haven't seen that on PC lately. Oh, she's gone. Have you tried playing The Witcher 3? I think I'm gonna add it on my. I'm gonna try check Saints Row 4. I mean, I kind of like the Saints Row 3 before, but I haven't really finished it. I do play Street Fighter 4 and 5 a bit, but I haven't really played online matches with those games. Right now I'm only playing some of Apex Legends and more of PUBG. Yeah, Witcher 3 should be that should definitely be in your on your list because yeah, it's an open world and although I was already playing it on my PC, but lately they released it in Nintendo Switch, and I've got Nintendo Switch, and I kind of like. I mean, I want to buy it and then just play it outside. Oh, I also play Diablo 3 as well, if you know that. And I bet they're gonna I think announce Diablo 4 or Diablo 2 remaster this November. I'm quite excited.
Yeah.
It's all what I've been looking for. I mean, it's all what I've been waiting for. Diablo 4. I think I was only in the first part of the Witcher 3 campaign. I haven't really had time to play that because it's pretty long. You know? You got lots of side quests and all the side. I mean, that side quest almost threw me off from the game. So instead, I just finished God of War 3, but I haven't really finished all the quests yet. I think I needed to finish the Valkyrie. I mean, it's if I remember it correctly, I'm gonna have to defeat the Queen, Valkyrie Queen. Yeah. How about you? Were you able to play? Have you finished God of War? I mean, for me, it was the best game. Yeah. Trumps, thanks for dropping by. I'll make sure to follow you. Yeah.
Round 1.
Yeah, I will, bro. Thanks for dropping by. I mean, there's not a lot of people dropping on the Switch in my game.
KO.
See you around. Yeah.
Round 2. Fight. KO. Round 3. Fight.
Yeah, good.
KO.
That was a fan.
Round 4. Fight.
Yeah, sure. I will.
KO.
I will definitely
Corre
follow
de
you.
volta pra sua mamãe.
There's no many visitors on my page, you know. Please, okay.
Get ready for the next battle.
Deixa eu te testar pra ver se você luta de verdade.
Followed you, bro.
Round
Thanks.
1. Fight. KO. Round 2. Fight.
Nice break. Look at the damage.
KO. Round 3. Fight. KO. Round 4. Fight.
Oh, huh. I'm dead.
KO. Final round. Fight.
That's bad. Nope. Didn't know this. Oh. Oh. Ah, crap.
KO.
良き部をお持ちですね。
気分お持ちですね。
Get ready for the next battle. Round 1. Fight.
Go.
KO. Round 2. Fight.
Ah, wait.
KO.
Trying hard to
Round
get that
3.
while standing. I really can't.
Fight. KO. Round 4. Fight.
Yeah.
Oh, what the heck happened?
Yeah. Yeah.
KO. You
Didn't know
lose.
what happened.
いい子ね
Oh, I dropped that.
Get ready for the next battle.
Vamos lá. Eu vou chutar sua bunda até o inferno.
Round 1. Fight.
Yeah. Yeah. Ha. Yeah. 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 Ha.
Perfect. Round 2. Fight.
That's really a nice trick.
KO. Round 3. Fight.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
KO. Round 4. Fight. KO. You lose.
いい子ね
Get ready for the next battle.
Vamos lá. Eu vou.
Round 1. Fight.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
That's the only wall combo I know.
Yeah.
KO. Round 2. Fight.
Yeah.
Oh, what the...
Yeah. Yeah.
KO.
Outstanding.
Round 3.
Need to do it.
Fight.
Yeah. Ha.
missed one. I think down forward one. Before I can do that.
Vamos lá. Eu vou chutar sua bunda até o inferno.
Round 1. Fight. KO. Round 2. Fight. KO. Round 3. Fight.
What do you mean, okay? What?
KO.
Corre de volta pra
win.
sua mamãe.
Yeah. Oh, that's bad.
Daddy,
Mm.
and once I do the G, is it?
Yeah. Fun start. Yeah.
New challenger.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nope. Oh, okay. Let's just forward, please.
New challenger. Get ready for the next battle.
Oh, I keep doing the up forward 3 when it's only a forward 3. So stupid.
Round 1. Fight.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
What the heck is going on?
Yeah.
KO. Round 2. Fight.
Yeah. Yeah.
Round 3. Fight.
Vem aqui. Yeah. Morra.
KO. Round 4. Fight. KO. Final round.
Unfair.
Fight. KO. You win.
Você está me dando sono.
Get ready for the next battle.
Desculpa, mas você vai ter que morrer.
لا أريد ذاك، لكن سأقاتلك إذا اضطررت.
Round 1. Fight. KO. Round 2. Fight. Perfect. Round 3. Fight. KO. Round 4. Fight. KO. Final round. Fight. KO. You win.
Você está me dando sono.
Get ready for the next battle. Round 1. Fight.
Vem aqui. Yeah.
KO. Round 2. Fight.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
KO. Round 3. Fight.
Yeah. Ha. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
KO. Round 4. Fight.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
KO. You win.
Você tem técnica, mas não tem alma.
Get ready for the next battle.
لا أريد ذاك، لكن سأقاتلك إذا اضطررت.
Round 1. Fight.
Yeah.
أقضي عليك. انتهى أمرك.
KO. Round 2. Fight.
Yeah. Yeah.
KO. Round 3. Fight.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not really fair, no?
Yeah. 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 Vem aqui. Yeah. Yeah. Morra.
KO. Round 4. Fight.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
KO. You win.
Você tem técnica, mas não tem alma.
Get ready for the next battle.
Desculpa, mas você vai ter que morrer.
لا أريد إيذائك، لكن سأقاتلك إذا اضطررت.
Round 1. Fight.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
KO. Round 2. Fight.
Yeah. 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 More. Yeah.
KO. Round 3. Fight.
Yeah. Yeah.
KO. Round 4. Fight. KO. Final round. Fight.
Yeah. 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 More. Yeah. Yeah.
KO. You win.
Você está me dando sono.
Get ready for the next battle.
Desculpa.
Round 1. Fight. KO. Round 2. Fight.
Yeah.
سأقضي عليك. انتهى أمرك.
KO. Round 3. Fight.
Yeah. 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 More.
Round 4. Fight.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
سأقضي عليك. انتهى أمرك.
KO. Final round. Fight.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
KO.
لن أستسلم أبدا.
Get ready for the next battle.
Oh no!
لا أريد.
Vamos lá. Eu vou chutar sua bunda até o inferno.
Round 1. Fight.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
KO. Round 2. Fight.
Yeah. Yeah.
KO. Round 3. Fight. KO. Round 4. Fight.
سأقضي عليك. انتهى أمرك.
Great. Final round. Fight.
Yeah. Yeah.
سأقضي عليك. انتهى أمرك.
KO.
لن أستسلم أبدا.
challenger. New challenger. New challenger. New challenger. Get ready for the next battle. Round one. Fight. KO. Round two. Fight. KO. Round three. Fight.
Yeah.
Round 4. Fight.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Great. You lose. New challenger. Get ready for the next battle.
Vamos lá. Eu vou chutar sua bunda até o inferno.
Round 1. Fight.
Yeah.
KO. Round 2. Fight.
Yeah. 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 Morra. Yeah. Yeah.
KO. Round 3. Fight.
Yeah. Corre de volta pra sua mamãe.
Get ready for the next battle.
Deixa eu te...
Round 1. Fight.
Yeah.
KO. Round 2. Fight.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Great. Round 3. Fight. KO. Round 4. Fight. KO. You lose. New challenger. Get ready for the next battle. Round 1. Fight. Perfect. Round 2. Fight. KO. Round 3. Fight. KO. Round 4. Fight. KO. Final round. Fight.
Ha! Yeah! 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 Ha! Yeah! 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 More!
KO. You lose.
Das war knapp.
Get ready for the next battle.
Vamos lá. Eu vou chutar sua bunda até o encontro.
Round 1. Fight.
Yeah! 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 Yeah!
KO. Round 2. Fight. KO. Round 3. Fight.
Yeah!
KO.
Ich
You
glücklicher.
lose. Get ready for the next battle. Round 1. Fight.
Yeah!
KO. Round 2. Fight.
Yeah! 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 More! Yeah!
KO.
Yeah!
Round 3. Fight.
Yeah! More! Yeah! de volta pra sua mamãe.
New challenger. New challenger. Get ready for the next battle. Round one. Fight.
Yeah.
KO. Round two. Fight. KO. Round three. Fight. KO. Round four. Fight.
Yeah.
KO. You win.
Você está me dando sono.
Get ready for the next battle. Round one. Fight.
Yeah.
KO. Round two. Fight.
Yeah.
KO. Round three. Fight.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
KO. Round four. Fight.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
KO. Final round. Fight.
Vem aqui. Yeah. Yeah. Morra.
Great. You win.
Você está me dando sono.
Get ready for the next battle. Round one. Fight.
Yeah. Yeah. Morra. Yeah. Ha. Yeah. Yeah.
KO. Round two. Fight.
Yeah. Yeah. Vem aqui. Yeah. Yeah. Morra.
KO. Round three. Fight. You win.
Você está me dando sono.
New challenger. New challenger. Welcome to the King of Iron Fist Tournament 7. Katarina Alves. New challenger. New challenger. Get ready for the next battle.
Vamos lá. Eu vou chutar sua bunda até o inferno.
Round 1. Fight.
Yeah.
KO. Round 2. Fight.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
KO. Round 3. Fight.
Yeah.
KO. You lose.
Yeah.
New challenger.
Yeah. Yeah.
New challenger.